My name is Melissa Stockham. I am a member and past president of the Rotary eClub of Florida, and I welcome you all to this meeting and look forward to talking to you a little bit about how to set up a non-for-profit organization in the state of Florida. First of all, I am an attorney. I have been an attorney now for 21 years. I'm a graduate of the University of Florida College of Law, and this is something that is a private passion of mine. It is not actually my actual area of expertise, probably because it's too much fun. But the fact is, what I'm trying to do here is, what I would like to do is offer Rotarians a chance to learn the basics. Now, of course, there are great consultants you can go to, and consultants can be great if you need special projects and when you need someone to guide the whole process through. As you will learn shortly, this is a very laborious process, but the end result is, one, you get to create an organization that fulfills the promise in an area that is of concern to you. It's like once a pastor said to me, one of the things you have to do in this world is when you see a hole, fill it, because if you don't, somebody else is going to step in it. So for that reason, I think it behooves us as Rotarians, people who want to make the world a better place, to be, to set things up as a business. And it's a business geared towards not making a profit naturally, but towards the common good. And our government, in its wisdom, has provided a way for organizations that are set up for different purposes other than making a profit to have certain advantages. And so, Phyllis, if you'd be so kind as to show the first screen, or share the screen. And if I need a screen change, what should be my code word? Okay. All righty. How to set up a nonprofit organization. There's my contact information. I do a lot more than non-for-profits. In fact, that's not my main area of practice. But if you need a lawyer in my field or another area, I'll be happy to help you out. So Phyllis, if you will. Phyllis?
Yeah, I'm trying. It's just delayed, I guess. I have signaled it. There we go. Hope it doesn't go too fast. Do you see it?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
First question people might want to ask is, why form a non-for-profit? Now, for those of us who have a compelling drive to help with a certain problem, this could be kind of a no-brainer, but this is kind of the reasons why our government does allow for us to create non-for-profits. These are the benefits of it. One, it benefits society. Most hospitals are non-for-profits. A great number of major businesses you wouldn't even think of. Some insurance companies, believe it or not, I know some people laugh at that, are non-for-profits. Most of your charities, we all get those things in the mail about, can you donate here? And we all donate. And we love to hear from these people. And the Rescue Society we get every year, Easter Seals, all of that. And again, these are things that benefit society. That often creates what we call the halo effect. Basically the idea that you're doing good, you're not doing it just because you want to get rich. There's a lot of respect behind that. People know you're not getting super rich of it. So the people are like, oh, this is somebody who really is in it for a committed purpose. And it attracts people who feel that way. Exemption from federal income tax. Yes, you don't have to go through a lot of the papers, but please, pretty please, with sugar on top, talk to a tax attorney about those matters. I'm not as well familiar with them. And that they can be, once you have everything set, a good tax attorney is always someone you want to have on board. Tax deductible contributions. People can deduct things and write it off on their taxes. A lot of your major charities take cars. If you have a car that you're not going to get anything out of it, boats, houses. You can transfer stocks to a non-for-profit for a deduction, all kinds of different things. You can donate things to, like when you go to your church and you write your check, or your synagogue or mosque or what have you, you write a check that is tax deductible. It's a big appeal to a lot of people because they can use the tax write-off, and it's for things. The key is you say that they did not receive anything in return for those things except what we call intangible religious benefits. Reduced postal rates is something else that's an advantage of non-for-profits. Possible exemption from state income tax, sales and employment taxes, definitely. Exemption from paying federal income taxes. And something I did not know when I was doing this research, and this, by the way, comes straight off of the irs.gov website. So it's basically coming straight out of the taxation code. So it definitely is kind of like a step-by-step in that sense. But receiving 501c financing, I didn't know that was available. That's something that can be most useful. It costs a lot to run a business. One charity I was very involved with years ago does a lot of work with helping kids with cancer. That's a very popular topic, and one where as many great organizations exist for that purpose, there's always room for a few more. But yeah, but the goods financing, if you're trying to build a condo, if you're trying to a condo to keep your business in, or a headquarters, one of that, if you get to that point, then that helps with that. Next slide, please, Phyllis.
Missy, there's a big clarification that has to be made between like Rotary and the Rotary Foundation. We're a membership club and we're a 501c4. And when you give money to us as a club, you can't deduct it. So people think, well, I'll give to the Rotary Club. And when you give to the club itself, it's not a deduction. So when you write your membership dues, it's not a deduction. But when you give to the foundation of the club or to the Rotary Foundation, it's a deduction. It's a 501c3 when you give to the foundation. And
okay.
And if a club has a foundation, a 501c3 foundation, that's we're a not-for-profit club, but we don't have a foundation. So that's two different things. And you have to ask that question, whether you're writing it for a non-for-profit into a non-for-profit 501c3 account, or whether you're writing it to a 501c4 or 5 or 6 or whatever that other account is.
Right.
I never even heard of the 501c4. It's something that I have to look into it.
It's a membership organization, which is what Rotary is. And then Rotary, this was formed back in, I think it was 59, when Rotary itself was sued by the federal government and told they had to separate and form the Rotary Foundation separately. So and then you have all these other clubs too out there, Sertoma and the Lions Club and all these other clubs, and they have to have separate monies. They have to have separate bank accounts for their foundations and 501c3s.
Got it.
And separate entities. They have to be separate. They have to have this form that you're looking at here.
Okay. Okay, responsibilities of a nonprofit organization. Thank you for clarifying that up, Phyllis, because admittedly,
that's very good. I had no idea. I still have to look more into it. Yeah, thank you.
Responsibilities of a nonprofit organization. If the government is going to give you certain benefits and rights, naturally they're going to expect certain things out of you in sort of a social contract. That's how we get into responsibilities of a nonprofit organization. These are things that you have to do, or they will yank a nonprofit status in a heartbeat, and all the people who've donated will be most unhappy with you if that happens. Conduct exempt purpose activities. You can only do something that is based upon the purpose of the club, and it must serve the general good. We'll get into that more later. You can't use it and say it's something that helps kids or helps the elderly, and then you're turning around and running another kind of business through it. They're very stringent as to where you can and cannot put these things. So it has to be maintained and must be handled for the quote unquote exempt purposes. Record keeping. Very important for any business, but much more so than if you're doing a non-for-profit, because there's so much being on the line. Keeping detailed records. I don't know about you. A lot of people will use, say, for example, Google spreadsheets or Excel. I guess when you're in the embryonic stages, those are fine. I've never heard of it. But when you get to the point where you get that letter from the government saying that people can donate to you, I think it's a good investment if it's something in your budget to have a good accountant who's going to be able to do this so that you don't have to worry about that. You can focus on other things. One thing, if you've never run a business before, one of the biggest things that makes you sweat is where the money is. So always, always, always have somebody who you can count on so that you don't have to focus on that as much and focus on what your true purpose is. You have to keep records of all activities, financial and non-financial. You have to hold annual meetings. You have to keep track of annual filings. There's a certain number of forms you see there, Form 490, EM, and so forth. Moreover, you have to follow all your state's disclosure rules, allow certain inspection of certain IRS filings, annual return of 990s, attachments and supporting documents, accept donors' names and addresses on Schedule B, approved application for exemption, and the letter from the IRS ruling that your organization has exempt status. What that means is once you get that letter from the government, you're going to have to go to the state and make sure the state is aware of that, which means you have to be registered with the state as a business, as you would need to be anyway. And so, but that, again, all these things have to be done in a timely fashion. And that's why, basically, these are the checks that our government has put on this to make sure that it is going to be something that is going to be worthy of nonprofit. Phyllis, if you would please, thank you. What does society benefit? Services provided by private individuals relieve governmental burdens. Probably some of you remember at the time in the late 2000s, early 2010, when universal health care was passed in this country. There was talk at first about getting some non-for-profits involved with it. And truth be told, because hospitals are involved, they are involved in it. But the thing is, they wanted something that would mean that the taxpayers wouldn't have to pay. It could be something that could be handled by non-for-profits. And there are some health insurance companies that are out there that cater to certain groups. And the idea is you get that. You don't need to necessarily get ACA. But basically, the idea is service provided by private individuals relieve governmental burden. Schools. You can open up a school under a 501c3. There are a lot of them out there. Most private colleges are 501c3s. That is why now, of course, as Phyllis correctly points out, there's also the foundation. But a lot of your schools are 501c3s, and you can donate things. Don't believe me? Go to University of Florida and see how many donations have been made through buildings named after donors. And when you go there, it's like you taking a step back in Florida history, right, Phyllis? Okay, that joke didn't work. But anyway, organizations that serve society under the exempt purposes of 501c3, charitable, things that help other people, provide services, provide goods. City Rescue Mission is one. Anything that provides what Odette's company provides a charitable. They help people in need. Religious churches have the exemption under here. This has been very controversial, and believe it or not, in some ways, it is something that has been afforded in our Constitution. However, the government has in recent years, they've changed some of the laws, but it used to be very, very stringent about certain things. For example, churches back in the day, if a church had 501c3 standing, they were not allowed to talk any type of politics. The Johnson Act, which was repealed fairly recently, the idea is that the church should not be making pronouncements on that if they're receiving non-for-profit status from the government they may be criticizing. So that's one thing. And of course, educational, schools, churches, anything that is geared towards advancing education. I have a friend who I used to help out a lot, who some of you probably know him, but he runs a non-for-profit where he brings in volunteer tutors on Saturday morning to work with a group of kids at one of the big schools over in downtown Orlando. They bring them over there every Saturday morning, feed them breakfast, have some social time with them, and then we try to tutor them. Great non-for-profit, helping, again, someone who saw a need, young people who live in the inner city are not getting the kind of education they deserve, and helped get tutors for that. Scientific, towards discoveries. All of the major vaccines and stuff like that come from that. Literary, forwarding literature, testing for public safety. Rotarians and other charities, of course, were very active in testing for the COVID virus. So very, very involved with that. Fostering a national or international amateur sports competition. The Olympics has a number of these. And preventing cruelty to children or animals. So all kinds of places. And again, the key is, how does it benefit society? My mom recently wanted to start a charity, a 501c3, and every time I go see her, she's been on me about this for years. My mother's big passion is helping to restore cemeteries where Revolutionary soldiers are buried. My mother is very big into the history kind of thing. And so we have, and both my mother and I are DAR qualified. And so, and she wanted to create something where basically these people could go and renovate a lot. I mean, you believe some of the cemeteries do not look good. Help to renovate those cemeteries so that the people who reside, well, who stay there, can rest in peace. And every time I see her, she's on my case about that. But at any rate, so anything that benefits society. Next slide, please, Phyllis.
Yes.
Charitable. Hold on a second. Now mine is not behaving. Charitable. What does it mean to be charitable? Relief for the poor, the distressed, and the underprivileged. We talked about that. Advancement of religion, advancement of education or science, erecting or maintaining public buildings, monuments, or works. A lot of your major monuments that you can think of here in the state of Florida are kept up by a foundation or a 501c that takes care of that. Lessening the burdens of government, lessening neighborhood tensions, eliminating prejudice and discrimination, defending human and civil rights secured by law, combating community deterioration, and combating juvenile delinquency. If any of you are interested in starting a charity within the latter, call me. I'm a former juvenile prosecutor and juvenile defense attorney. I can help you with that. I know a lot of people in all those communities. Any questions before we move on? Yeah, okay. So let's say you've decided, okay, it's time for me to start an organization. The first thing you want to do is name your organization. Take an afternoon to brainstorm. Or if it comes to you, if you like me and you can be icing cupcakes or making chili or whatever you're doing in your day and it comes to you, okay, let's get the name and get something. It's time to be creative. What first thing you gotta do, obviously, is make sure the name meets the state requirements to have that name as a business. Check Sunbiz for the availability of the name. We have Sunbiz here in the state of Florida. If you're not in Florida, you'd have to basically check to see if the name has been taken by another business in your state. There may be a need to publish the name, which if you've ever had to publish anything, probate case, divorce case, you know how that goes. You have to publish it in a paper. It doesn't really matter if anybody's going to read it. All you need to prove is circulation. And if you happen to be in Orange County, the Apopka Chief is very good for that. I've used them many times for publishing divorce cases. In Seminole, you have the Sanford Herald. So basically just publish it. All you have to do is show it's been published and nobody claimed it and you're good. And then that name will be needed as a vital part of the Articles of Incorporation. The Articles of Incorporation is the first document you will draft. If you've ever started a business in the state of Florida, incorporated an LLC, a partnership or whatever, you've had to do an Articles of Incorporation. We'll get more of that in a second because it's a whole lot of sound and fury signifying nothing. Any questions so far?
They've gone to an online option for articles.
Hang tight, Phyllis. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Thank you. But you're right. But we'll get that in a second. Can we see the next slide? Okay. Next slide deals with that. First thing you have to do is recruit incorporators. Now, when I say that, that is depending on how big you want it to be. Truth be told, you know how many incorporators you need? One. You can have more than one, but you need at least one. Because here's what you do. As Phyllis correctly pointed out, a little bit of foreshadowing for what I was about to say. You basically, what the incorporator is going to do is go on Sunbiz, pull up the necessary forms, put the information in, hit send, pay the fee, and hit send. And at that point, the role of responsibility for the incorporator is over. Once that paper is filed with the state of Florida, that is all you need to do. So that's, and again, once that's done, the name of the company will be coming to you in a certificate very soon, and you can get started with the next stage. But this is the part where it's the most embryonic part of the business itself is this point in it.
Well,
next
that's
slide.
existed for a long time. What I was talking about was they just recently changed the posting of the name. The publication of the name has recently gone electronic now.
Yeah. Most of these have gone electronic, and that's good because that's good and bad because it's great for convenience. But if you're like me and you have to write things out because you need it under your hands, it can be kind of anxiety provoking. But it does, it makes things run a lot faster. And I personally think that's a good thing, because that whenever things can be made more convenient, that means more opportunity. So I think that's a very positive thing. Next slide. Recruit your initial directors. These are the governing body of the non-for-profit. They are the stakeholders in the organization's purpose and success. If you are selecting people for this, make them people you can work with, make them people who are committed to your cause, and people who are not going to have any conflicts of interest. You'd be surprised how that can come up. Basically, the Florida requirements for the directors of any major any non-for-profit, or there has to be 3. They have to be natural persons, 18 years of age or older, maybe 15 or older if permitted by the board of directors or bylaws. There is no residency requirement. I'm now working on an idea for a non-for-profit with some friends of mine, one of whom lives in Virginia, one of whom lives in North Carolina. And you don't have to live in the state of Florida. I'm not sure if you had to be a United States citizen or not. I'm not sure. Phyllis, do you know that by chance?
No, I've never heard that requirement.
I don't suspect it is. Odette?
No, I know about the no residency requirement, but I was just wondering if I have a member who lives, say, in New York, can she raise funding, like if she wants to do a big sale, something like this in that state? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's no reason, because we have out-of-state corporations here all the time and stuff.
Oh, okay. She was asking, we want to do things right. She says, but, is it okay? And I says, I have to find out, because I know, we want to do something in another state if we're not supposed to. Yeah, so, okay, so that, very good. Thank you. So I can tell Gladys this. She wanted to do a big sale to raise funding for the, start raising funding for the summer program for the kids. Yes, okay. Thank you.
Yes. The term of your initial directors will be 1 year. And if you are voting on anything, the quorum is a majority. In some instances, directors younger than 18 may not be counted toward a quorum. But one thing you want to do if you're required to have 3. I've heard it said, though, just to be on the safe side, pardon me, it's good to have whatever number you want. If you want more than 3, don't go with 4, go with 5. If you want more than 5, don't go with 6, don't go with 7. Anything more than that tends to get too unruly unless your business grows to the point where you need that many people for whatever reason. So, and then for committees, it's good to have a minimum of 2 directors. But basically, the reason why you want to have an odd number of directors to start off with is there's no possibility of a split tie among votes. You don't want to have a hung jury, as it were. You want to have at least one person who'd be the, unless that person abstains and you're in a world of hurt. But same time, you want an odd number, and you do not want all of them or even a sizable number of them to be related. If you have, I think there's a rule of thumb, but I haven't not exactly heard for sure what it is, but I've heard that, for example, if you have 5, at least 3 need to not be related to one another. If you have 7, at least 5 need to not be related to one another. So that way you can't say, well, this entire organization is said for, for this particular common good, but at the same time, half the people on it or almost all the people on it are related to one another, so they're voting for their family's interest. You don't want that. So for that reason,
I've seen an entire church owned by a family, formed and owned by a family, and when sons would get out of way with the family, they would eject them. And then a son would get back in with the family and be brought back in. And then the other son would be thrown out. And it was just a mess. And it was all family members on the board. And yet the church is supposed to be the people. Well, none of the members were listed on the board. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I could tell you with my church, John is my church is in the Episcopal tradition, and we're part of a church that is part of the Diocese of Central Florida. And just to get a handle on a lot of these things at the time that I was on the vestry, which is kind of like the directors, if you're not familiar, but not quite. I went and looked at the articles of incorporation for our church, and the pastor was like, "Why in the world do you want to see that?" It's like, I have a right to see it. I'm on the vestry, and I'm also a member. So, I got to see that, and I got to see the initial bylaws of the church, and it's on these things. I always say, I'll get to that second. Basically, the best thing to do is to always keep those things in mind. But yeah. That's an excellent point. And that does happen sometimes in very rural areas, Phyllis. I mean, there are certain areas in this country where, at some level, everybody's related to one another at some capacity. And everybody knows their families have been there for several generations. And what do you do then and on top of that, in those areas, you've got a church. Anytime you three leaves rub together, you can build a church. And you got to look here in Central Florida. There's a church on every corner. This church, that church, and other types of houses worship the same way. So, it raises questions, but at the same time, as long as I'll just leave it raises questions because I don't want to overstep my bounds. Next slide, please. Recruit officers. Now, one of the things that we will do in the course of creating a non-for-profit is write up the bylaws. The eligibility for being an officer is defined in the articles or bylaws. One of your officers is going to prepare minutes of the directors and members' meetings and authenticate records of the corporation. That's a secretary. That's always a job that can be hard to fill in a Rotary Club, hint, hint to anyone who might be so interested. They are elected by the board. When we have our elections officers, it's kind of the same thing, term of 1 year. 2 or more offices may be held by the same individual. A few years ago, John and I got involved. He's not here yet to corroborate my story, but we were very involved with the American Legion here. If you're all familiar with the American Legion, I'm auxiliary eligible, and John is Sal, Sons of the American Legion, eligible. But most American Legions have a very vast board of directors. I remember when we joined, it was September of, I believe, 2018, we joined the American Legion, and John gets a call the following Saturday saying, "Can you be at a meeting at the Post on Sunday?" And John says, "Why?" And Melissa too. We're like, "Why?" And he said, "We need you as officers." And some Legion posts are very active. This one, I'm sad to say, is not. And you would see when they have a huge slate of officers for everything you can possibly imagine. And you see 2 or 3 people up there with 6 to fill 6 positions. It's kind of like, wow. But yeah, 2 or more officers may be held by the same individual, but they are elected. And the bylaws will also deal with things like compensation, if that's an issue. Most of the time, for most people, they want to do this as volunteers, and but if it comes to a point where you need to hire somebody and they need to be compensated, this is where that comes from. Any questions about any of that? Okay. Appoint a registered agent. A registered agent is an individual who is authorized to receive legal services in the state of Florida on behalf of an organization. I do these a lot in my other line of work because one thing my practice handles is guardianships. And so I oftentimes am asked by my clients to be a registered agent on behalf of the guardianship, because a guardianship is a business too, and it does get court supervision. And if anybody needs to be served papers, they get served to a registered agent. When my clients need me to do that, it's like I sign paperwork. Yes, this is where my office is. If you need to serve papers on the organization, this is where you can find me. But this is the person authorized to receive legal service in the state of Florida on behalf of the organization. This person must reside in the state of Florida and maintain an office that is open during regular business hours. If you have a lawyer on the board, you may want to ask them to do it because they're most if their practice allows it. But just somebody who has a shingle, or just somebody who can maintain an office to receive process service in case it comes up, because it does, and crazy cases. Any questions so far? Prepare and file articles of incorporation. This is, again, we talked about before. You push a button and it's filed. Officially marks the creation of the organization, documents where and when the organization was formed, must, to pass 501c3 status, limit the organization's purpose to one or more of the exempt purposes set forth in 501c3, will be critical when you apply for 501c3 exemption. Verify that the language of your articles meets the requirements of the state and the IRS, and you may be required to publish your articles of incorporation. Again, when I first read my church's articles of incorporation, I was amazed at how pithy it was. I mean, and I say that, I must not be mean, but I'm just saying, I'm a lawyer, and anybody who knows how I like to write know that I tend to write in a way that is, shall we say, voluminous. In other words, I'm a motor mouth and it comes to my hands at times. But the fact is, if you try to write too much, you can box yourself in. Whenever it's kind of the same approach I took with when I write legal pleadings. Don't let your mouth write checks you hide can't cash. So I always say, keep it simple and to the point. There's no harm in keeping it slightly overbroad. You don't want to be so narrow that you narrow yourself in. Does that make sense? But you maybe, but that basically, this is when this is filed, that's the creation of the organization. Everything else follows. Next slide, please. What must be in your articles of incorporation? SunBizOrg has a form for non-for-profit articles of incorporation. It must set forth the following. Feel free to print this off and use this as a checklist. Name of corporation, principal place of business, and a mailing address for the corporation. Principal place of business must be a street address. Mailing address can be a post office number. Specific purpose or purposes for which your corporation is organized. Manner in which the electors are elected or appointed. Names, addresses, and titles. Name in Florida, street, address of the relational agent, registration to sign the space. Again, if you're working with a lawyer, they'll know where to sign this. Name and address of the incorporator. The incorporator must sign the space and print his or her name on the application. These days, it's just a matter of typing it in. And the effective date. That is the birth date of your organization. So again, I realize that I'm just kind of reading this stuff, but I think it's kind of self-explanatory. If you have any questions, feel free to give me a call. But feel free to just print this and use it as a checklist if you're inclined to do this. Any questions? Oh, go ahead.
Having owned the UPS store and having had several businesses, what's expected when it says address on when you're filling out any state form for a business and an organization is when it says address, they want your home address. And people say, well, I don't want to give my home address because it goes on SunBiz. That's the expectation, is a home address. And I had many times I had agents show up, FBI, Florida Bureau of Investigation agents, and agriculture agents show up trying to find people because they gave my UPS store as their address, as a street address for their home. And they were actually being hunted down. And if you remember the people that the hijackers for 9/11 used mailbox, etc. address for their addresses when they were training to as pilots. They used a mailbox, etc. address when they were trying to get their pilot's license.
Is that why we don't have a lot of mailbox, etc. anymore?
No, they changed into the UPS stores, but no, they used, and for everything else they did, they used a mailbox, etc. address. But the reason a lot of fraudsters use US mail addresses, PO boxes, and now you can use, because they're using them as street addresses now, is that the inspectors need to be able to go and find your house when there's a problem. the Department of Agriculture, who is most of the inspectors, or the Florida Bureau of Investigation or the FBI need to be able to go and find you when there's a problem, when there's fraud. And they can't if it's a P.O. box or a mailbox store.
But in the application itself is just, I remember some places, even when I'm planning for the business, it says no P.O. box.
Yeah.
Right. It says no, well, it actually says address on the application, and that means home address. And so it doesn't always say no P.O. box on it when you fill it out. It says address. And so it assumes you have the common sense to know that it's not a P.O. box. But people still put it down, and we have some members that don't give us a physical address. And I have no physical address for them. And so it looks like it when they put suite or unit number or, you know, something like that. And I have no personal home address for them. And so there's no way for me to give a personal home address for them because I've never been to their home. And so it is difficult. I could never find them if I wanted to. And so needless to say, the FBI wouldn't be able to.
Oh, they'll find you.
Well, they probably could. But the issue is that I've had them show up at my UPS store. I had 15 Department of Agriculture people trying to find a fraudster.
A lot.
And I captured people at my store and had the police come in and arrest them when they showed up. And I had DEA agents come into my store and catch people that I found the products for going through my store. And I had to get their home addresses for them. So it's important that you know that when it says name and address, it wants the home address on these forms and not a street address of a mailbox system or the street address of the U.S. Postal Store.
And the thing is, in my experience as a criminal defense attorney who, I can tell you, when it comes to non-for-profits, the Department of Agriculture does not play at all. I once had to handle a deposition that was held at 8 o'clock in the morning here, but 5 o'clock in the morning in California, where I was at the time. And I'm sitting there barely awake because I'm in California. It's 5 in the morning. I'm hearing these questions, you know, the coffee tried to help me out. I'm like, oh my God, you know? So it's like, wow, they don't play.
No, not when 15 of them show up at 8 o'clock in the morning at my store and demand the home address of a customer that was embezzling. No.
Yes. Articles of incorporation under section 501, forgive the fact that my computer does the copyright thing. I'm sorry about that. But to achieve tax exempt status, it must include the following. 1, limit the organization's purpose to one or more of the exempt purposes set forth in 501c3, meaning that's why they exist. Anything else is superlative, except obviously fundraising and things like that. 2, must not expressly empower the organization to engage in activities that are not in furtherance of its purposes. So basically anything else that's side stuff, no, the main purpose is what they're doing, what they focus for. And then 3rd, permanently, this is of course, as you might guess, where the rubber meets the road, permanently to dedicate assets of the organization to an exempt purpose under section 501c3. Do not want a circumstance where somebody buys a car or somebody donates a car to an organization and you thank them and then you decide, oh, we changed our mind. Oh, I'm gonna keep the car. No, you can't do that. So basically you have to permanently dedicate assets of the organization to an exempt purpose.
Is mute.
Public charities, easiest ones to get through, because obviously there are things that are well known and so forth, and they do serve a very direct public charity, very close greater good. The best case scenario when applying is being a public charity. There's statutory public charities, and then there's non-statutory public charities. Statutory public charities are by default. If you're for this purpose, boom, it's going to be relatively easy as long as everything else checks out. The obvious ones: churches, schools, private schools, healthcare providers. Non-statutory public charities falls into the category. There's certain things that have to be met. One, passes organizational operational tests. These are things that are a little more in detail. You can I would recommend talking to a consultant about that. B, has broad public support, receives a substantial portion of its support from publicly supported organizations, governmental units, and or the government. I would think PBS falls into this category, wouldn't you?
Mhm.
Yes, people donate to PBS, but they also receive money from the government because of the idea that public television is in everybody's interest. We have an interest in showing kids television that educates them and enlightens them and isn't trying to sell them a cereal every 3 minutes. Or every 5 minutes. So that's part of the reason why public television exists. No more than 1/3 of the support can come from gross investment income and unrelated business income. More than 1/3 of the support has to come from contributions, membership fees, and gross receipts for activities related to exempt functions. Again, I'll use the PBS example. And I am trying to get someone from WUCF to speak in a couple of weeks. So if anybody's interested, let me know, because then I can say, we've got a really good crowd who wants to see you. Again, why do they always have the membership drives? They have all kinds of support drives. Whenever you contribute to PBS, you're contributing to your favorite shows and so forth. The other categories, they can reasonably expect to receive that public support. They can assume broad public support for the first 5 years. Year 6 will be based on the first 5. So basically the idea is, this is saying that, yes, they're not getting that kind of public support now, but give it a few years and they will be. This is big, as you might guess, for hospitals and things like that. So, and then they will base it on where they're going in year 6. We based it on year 5. They'll look at the contributions and see if they match up. If they do match up, then they will be considered a non-statutory public charity. Any questions before we move on? So if you've got one of the first, the statutories, it's relatively easy. With the non-statutory, you have to prove it a little further. I'm sorry, did I interrupt somebody?
No, this is interesting.
Thank you. Next slide, please, Phyllis. First, you file the initial report. You file that after the articles of incorporation. Filing fee is $35. Designated registered agent fee is $35. Certificate of status is $875, and the certified copy is $875. If you've ever registered a corporation in the state of Florida, it's kind of the same thing. It's filling it out. It takes about 10 whole minutes for just the initial reports and so forth. And so the hardest part is drafting it. And again, I'm always a big favor of vague, not narrow, if you can. After the initial report and annual report are required every year, and the fee for that is $61.25, and it has to be mailed. I don't know if certified is not permitted or not, but it has to be mailed. You will get back the certificates. When you get back the certificates from the state of Florida, this will mean you're non-profit recognized as a company in the state of Florida. You don't get the magic letter yet, but you will soon. Next slide, please. Obtain an EIN number. Again, if you've ever run a business, this is relatively easy. It's a unique 9-digit number assigned by the IRS to identify the non-for-profit. This is your non-for-profit social security number. It is your tax ID number. You can get them. I mean, if you've ever gone on the irs.gov website, you can get one with minimal trouble. They say print your EIN number before closing your session. I mean, yes, if you have to get an EIN, please, if you have an iPad, just do a screenshot. You're doing on your computer, take a picture of it. Make sure you have it before closing the session. The good thing about an EIN number is it allows donors to deduct their donations from their taxes. Once you have the EIN number, you can open a bank account, apply for your 501c3 status, and submit 990 returns to the IRS. Once you have a bank account, then all of your, obviously, business transactions should go through that and nothing else. One thing I would recommend is, if you're going to set up a 501c3 and you bank with, let's say, to use an example, Bank of America, you might want to consider putting that money in a Wells Fargo account if you can, or Regions or another bank. Reason being is because this is something they taught me as a lawyer when it comes to trust accounts. There's too much temptation if you're having one of those moments to put the money that should be going into your into the business account, or in this case, the non-for-profit account, into your major operating account. You can't do that. The idea behind that is that you don't want your personal finances in any way involved with this. Sometimes the best way to guarantee that is to go ahead and just use a different bank. But it's entirely up to you. If you're better with record keeping than other people, you might be just fine with the same bank. But at any rate, any questions before we move forward?
Well, one thing is that you need to, on every page you advertise on, which may mean a footer on every one of your web pages, the bottom of every one of your letterheads, every coupon on every advertisement, you're required in the state of Florida to put a paragraph disclaimer with the statement that you and an exact statement from the state of Florida that you're advertising with your EIN number and the URL to the state of Florida that you're soliciting.
Okay, yeah, definitely.
You have to, it's by law. And so you will want to include your EIN on everything you do, every letterhead, every website, and they are entitled to that EIN.
Okay, I did not know that. Thank you for and I did not see that on the IRS IRS.gov website. So thank you for that. But yes, the Form SS4 is going to be your IRS tax number. So definitely get that. Next slide. Critical records to be stored. Store it in a fireproof file cabinet with a working lock. Very important. You need to keep your EIN letter, your bylaws, meeting minutes, 501c3 determination letter when you get it, and the articles of incorporation. Should be somewhere on wherever you're keeping the physical plant of your business. And only certain people should have access to these documents, as you might guess.
Electronically.
Yes.
Electronically.
But if you're going to do it electronically, may I recommend that you also
Wow.
Yes. Well, the problem with the cloud is make sure that you've got some kind of anti-hacking software so that it's impossible to get hacked, because as Phyllis correctly points out, you're going to be putting the EIN number on every document you send out. That's going to be temptation for certain kind of hackers. So you might want to go ahead.
EIN is totally public. EIN is totally public. It is not private. It is totally public. It's supposed to be given to every single person who makes a donation. It's public and searchable on the internet at the IRS.
Very good point. Thanks for bringing that up. But yes, all these need to be stored. If you want to do it electronically, I would take one. Check with me if you want to do it electronically. I'll look over the IRS code for you to make sure that that's okay.
And it's also at sunbiz.org. And every time you search a company at sunbiz.org, their EIN is right there. So is their articles of incorporation. And I search every business. I get ready to look up to see if they're legit, and their EIN and their articles of incorporation are right there.
Okay. Next, we look at doing the next slide, please. Establish initial governing documents and policies. Bylaws are the governing document for your nonprofit. Should be distributed to all board members. They are the organization's operating manual. Should be consistent with the articles of incorporation and the law. First order of business for the initial board of directors when they meet will be to review and ratify the bylaws. And the bylaws will be a roadmap from governance. So when you have your first meeting of your board of directors, you're going to review the bylaws and ratify them. And of course, debate and consultant debate is going to be possible. But basically, that's the key there. That's going to be the first order of business. But then again, these are the things that you have to keep in mind when you're creating the governing documents, which are by and large going to be bylaws. What should go in the nonprofit? Again, I've just written this out. Next slide, please, Phyllis. What should go in a nonprofit's bylaws? Again, feel free to use this as a checklist. Go through them, look through them. And our official name, principal address, purpose, outline of board structure, list of officers, a description of which we'll do, procedure for adding and removing board members, including qualifications for serving on the board, term limits for board members, schedule for regular and annual board meetings, details on giving notice of board meetings, rule on quorum requirements, list and descriptions of the board committees, dates that will be at the end of the fiscal year, rules of amendment for the bylaws, and how will you handle the dissolution of your nonprofit? When and how can you close a non-for-profit? One of the things I could say about your board meetings on this, definitely have that very laid out. I'll tell you a horror story. John and I were, he's not here because he could ratify this story for you. John and I are members of a church for a long time, in which the pastor he knew he was going to get thrown out because he knew what he had done wrong. And he decided the vestry meetings, if you would come to see the vestry meetings, as is your right in our church under the bylaws, any member can attend the vestry meetings. He decided they're private. And I was the one who got in his face, said, that's not how the law works. And I was basically told I was a bad Christian for challenging him. So things like that you have to be careful for. And because these are things that can have, non-for-profit, you can have it, even churches, if they do not keep these things in place, they can be in deep trouble. A lot of your independent churches, most of your mainstream religious organizations have large enough congregations where there's usually at least one good lawyer who's willing to volunteer their services to making sure that everything is on the up and up. But if you're in a smaller organization, you may not have that. So that's why it's always good to have outside people look at that. But if you're going to do your bylaws, I would recommend, again, use this as a checklist because it has everything you're going to need. Again, this comes right from the IRS code, so it should be pretty up to date. Any questions so far? Next slide, please. Develop a conflict of interest policy. You do not want a situation where someone in a key position has a competing interest and is making choices themselves that could benefit themselves to the harm of the organization. They should be required to disclose interest and abstain on voting on matters they could personally benefit from. Let's say one of your board members has a spouse who, let's say it's a medical charity that provides, raises money for therapy for young people, and you have somebody whose spouse is a doctor who would be somebody who'd be a service provider. That person's spouse, if they're on the board, cannot vote on that because obviously that'd be putting money in his or her pocket. And if the doctor performs the services, so you have to have some kind of policy in place to make sure this isn't just a feeding thing for that one individual. Policy should require directors to disclose interest and abstain on voting on matters they could benefit from. Both the bylaws and the conflict of interest policy will be sent with the application to the IRS for the exemption for the magical letter, and will have to be adopted and approved. Once the bylaws and the conflict of interest policy have been ratified and documented, they need to be saved with all the important records. You'd be surprised, especially if an organization lasts a particularly long time, how often these particular matters can come up. Next slide, please. Hold an organizational meeting of the board of directors. There must be at least 3. You may need to add more if getting a quorum might present a problem. When you have the first meeting, the order of business is 1, the agenda is 1, approve the bylaws, 2, adopt the conflict of interest policy, 3, elect directors, 4, appoint officers, 5, approve resolutions such as the opening of the organization's bank account. And again, 6, or the final is the meeting did not happen if there is no record of minutes. Next slide, please. Once you have all that stuff, you need to get the same stuff in the state of Florida. Get state of Florida's tax ID information, Form DR1, Florida business tax application, submit to Florida Department of Revenue. And then you want to apply. Next slide, the magic moment.
You want to get the county and the
What
city.
is this?
Yes.
Oh, the tax ID. Okay, I see what you mean. This is different than the EIN.
Yes. You got to get the state of Florida, same information, register in the state of Florida, register in your county, and register in your city.
Because I know we have that for business. I'll double check. Okay, go ahead.
Then you want to apply for 501c3 status. This is when this is where you apply for the magical letter. Allows you to apply for grants and grow fundraising while enjoying tax exempt status. The forms for that are Form 1023 or Form 1023EZ. Review the criteria and ascertain that you meet the educational requirements. Could require Form 1024 depending on the group. The fee is $600 for the 1023 and $275 for the 1023EZ, and you can pay that by www.pay.gov. This is where you apply for the magical letter. So you might want to go ahead and, if you're thinking about, print this up now, and that will be what you can start using. Next slide, please. I know we're out of time. Deadlines. Let me see. What else do we talk about?
Just
There's
keep
certain.
going.
Okay, because deadlines, 27 months after creation, file 1020. So basically 27 months after your articles, you can file the 1023 at pay.gov to apply. If approved, the IRS will consider your organization tax exempt from the start. So basically what that means is, let's say that you start your company in 2014, and then 2 years later, 2 years and 3 months later, you finally get the magical letter. All of the donations people have made, whoever donated the $600 for your 1023 form, whoever donated this, whoever donated that, it becomes tax deductible from the start. You will receive an acknowledgement of the application. It generally takes 90 days. Forgive my typing. If approved, you will be sent a determination letter. This determination letter will be among the permanent records. Keep on that, hold it, make 50 copies of it, frame a copy for your office, put a copy in that fireproof cabinet or in the cloud, and keep a copy of it, because you can take that letter into, let's say you're running a 5K for a charity. My husband, John, and I did this once, a charity that rescues animals and helps train to be service animals for veterans. And basically you take that letter, and if you're putting on a 5K, which means what supplies are you going to need that Publix might have? Bananas, water, bagels, maybe, napkins, plates, and that sort of thing. They'll donate. Publix is usually really good about that. But, but other organizations, this means that they'll donate to you because they can, when they file their taxes later, they can say, oh, by the way, here's this. And it helps, everybody, and plus it's another incentive for people to help and contribute. I think it does. It's a good thing. Next slide. Smaller groups, there are exemptions based on that. You can apply as a group, no need for individual applications. Group exemptions letter, basically a group of organizations can apply as a group. Next one is there's one for churches and other houses of worship. They do not need to apply for tax, but they exempt status, but they need to have other documents in place. But nonetheless, most churches will apply for a determination letter, just so that, again, a lot of people make their donations to their houses of worship because they know they can donate them. And that is why it is so important that when you get that letter at the end of the year from your house of worship, indicating how much you've donated over the course of the year, there's always the bottom things that that you have received nothing in return for this except, and of course it's in legal words, intangible religious benefits. So, but they do need to, most will apply for it just in case, because people want to make sure they can do that. Next slide. Post-application operational guidance. You may operate as a tax exempt organization while waiting on approval, but donors will have no insurance of their contribution deductible until that letter arrives. While waiting, take time to learn about your other responsibilities. Next slide, please. Then you need to apply for your state tax exemption. So when you get that IRS determination letter, immediately reply for the state one. In Florida, non-for-profits are subject to corporate income tax, but a non-for-profit is exempt from the federal taxation under the IRS code, is only required to file a Florida corporate tax return if it has unrelated business income. For example, again, I'll use the example of a church. If you belong to a church that sells books, that could be considered, let's say your pastor is let's say you go to a mega church and your pastor is a well-known person who writes books and goes on crusades and what have you. That individual might, under those circumstances, that might be considered unrelated business income. So even though the money does go to support the church, you might have to file it in the state just because of that. And with that, John's here, everybody. Next slide, please. apply again, certain nonprofit organizations are exempt from sales tax and use tax on purposes of rentals of tangible personal property if that property is used in carrying out the organization's non-for-profit activities. Our church rents to a school, and we depend on that church because we're a small church, and the income from the rental income from this tiny private school, again, non-for-profit, helps our church along. And so, that falls into, basically where, there's an exemption because it's done for basically without the church, without the school there and another church that comes there on occasion, our church would have to close their doors. So for that reason, this is very helpful in certain circumstances. Another thing is that you want to do as soon as you can, once you get the magical letter, is register for charitable solicitation. That means you can start sending out solicitations. Again, check with what the state allows. I don't have that information with me, but you can start soliciting and not be worried about being accused of fraud. So you register in state prior to any fundraising, soliciting, registering your home state and Odette, this may be the answer to your question. You need to register if you're going to solicit. You need to register in your home state and any other state which may be conducting solicitation. So if you're having the bake sale in Florida, if the nonprofit is in Florida, that's fine. But if somebody's in New York wanting to do a bake sale, that might be a little hairier. I'm not sure. I'd talk to somebody who knows a little more than I do. Small charitable organizations can have the sponsors application less than $25,000 in total revenue. This is a different category. Small charitable organizations, and I think it's done differently, but again, check with Florida on this. But fundraising is carried out by volunteers, members, or officers who are not compensated, and no part of the income goes to those individuals. Charitable organization or sponsor does not utilize a professional fundraising and consultant, professional solicitor, or commercial co-venturer. If the organization's qualification for small charitable organization qualifies, the extended form must be filed within 30 days. Any questions?
This is the statute, and what we had to I have to fill out the form for every year and submit the all of our annual income and expenses for every year. The treasurer is supposed to do it. This is that statement, that the demand for the paragraph that goes on everything we do, even every ticket if we were to sell a raffle ticket. This is, they provide us with this paragraph that includes the URL and the phone number for the Department of Agriculture.
Okay, cool. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we say finally obtain other business licenses and permits. So many of these, this is why it's usually a good idea to bring in a group of initial directors who have experience in running that type of organization. If you are planning on running a school, yeah, you're going to have to worry about the Department of Education and the State Department of Education. Also, how are you going to run your operations? All of that, you're going to need to have all your proper licenses. For any teachers you might want to hire, what are going to be your hiring practices? What are going to be your certification practices? Are you doing anything to make sure that these individuals have a background check and so forth? SBA.gov apparently has a very good list of these things, so I definitely recommend them. And that final slide, I guess I ran out of time, but it deals with, I was intending last slide to deal with file IRS form 1023. We already talked about that earlier. I have no idea why I created that slide. Anyway, that's all I have. Does anybody have any questions?
Very good. Very informative.
Thanks, Odette. I appreciate that. Phyllis, any other questions?
No, I have the URL in the chat box for the slideshow, and then we will send the video out for people to be able to watch, and then the URL will be available on the internet for people to download.
Okay.
Like me.
Yes, like John.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thanks,
It was
Phyllis, for all
nice
you
seeing
do.
you too. Yes. Yes.
Bye.
It was very good.
Ready for the
Thank you.
four-way test, everybody?
Yes, the four-way test.
Thank you, Dr.
Okay.
O. It was good. Thank you. I have a
Is it-
friend who's always asking questions, so now I can answer a few.
Okay.
I'm not a lawyer, but
But
tell them a few.
Odette, put it out, send them to me.
Okay, very good. It was very good. Yes.
All right. John's antsy about doing the 4-way test. Phyllis, he drives me crazy every morning. We say our morning prayer and then we do the 4-way test. And
That's
when I
wonderful.
say official to all concerned, he drives me up the wall. I'm telling you right now.
Well, let's go ahead and say it.
We think, say, or do, is it truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? And is it fun?
Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
I've had fun. Y'all have a great weekend.
You too, my darling. Thank you.
Thanks, Odette. Bye, Phyllis. Bye, Odette.
Bye-bye.